When we hear that a loved one is nearing his or her end of life, it can bring heartache, anger, anxiety, and deep sadness. Sometimes the news is unexpected and sudden. Other times, a friend, a parent, a child, or a grandparent has been deteriorating for some time, and the approaching end brings feelings of grief, coupled with relief or peace. While each end-of-life experience is unique and can bring about challenges in our families and friendships, it can also be an opportunity to make Christ's presence known in the world. As Christians, we are to journey beside loved ones and community members at the final stages of life. No one should have to experience dying alone. When reflecting on the end of life, we hope that the reflex in our Christian contexts seeks to accompany and support the sick and dying. Let us be present, physically, emotionally, and spiritually, so that we may be attentive and attuned to those we encounter. The experience of dying is complex. It affects us in so many ways. We can think about how it affects us physically. We sense that our bodies are weak and in pain. This can change how we see ourselves and affects our self-confidence. Often we can do less and less by ourselves, depending more and more on others. We can also reflect on how the dying experience affects how we act and how we speak. The experience of pain and suffering makes communication very strenuous. We may have difficulty sharing what we're going through. This can lead to a deep feeling of loneliness or a sense of being trapped. We might feel that nobody understands what I am going through. If we try to converse with those around us, it can be frustrating or tiresome and can lead to misunderstandings, irritations, and sometimes rejections. We can also reflect on time. Typically, we approach death with a great deal of uncertainty. It may challenge our ability to be genuinely present, disrupt how we foresee ourselves in the future, or how we remember our past. When diagnosed with a terminal illness, there can be a sense of a loss of life, that I had a life before, but now I've lost it. The time that remains is viewed as useless, even sometimes leading to a desire to end it as quickly as possible. This shift in how we see ourselves in the past, present, and future can generate a lot of fear and anguish about what will come. To be challenged by our human limitations at the end of life is normal. However, we cannot shoulder our fragility and vulnerability without the support, care, and accompaniment of others. Only together can we ensure that the suffering does not become all-consuming. Let us be attentive to the many sources of suffering and those we accompany. Let us listen with a steady and patient presence.
As Christians, the model to help us walk through the end-of-life experience is in God, who made himself human. How does Jesus respond to the sick and dying person? In the Gospels, Jesus encounters people who face illness, pain, and suffering. Jesus is never indifferent and is powerfully present during these encounters. He models profound compassion and does not abandon the struggling person. He does not explain suffering, and he does not give value to suffering in itself. Jesus shows us concretely how God is present to the sick and dying. In this sense, human fragility, supported through the lens of faith, can become an experience of salvation. In my own life, how can the example of Jesus inspire me, teach me to approach the person at the end of life in the process of respect, mercy, and compassion? Journeying with someone at the end of life is often referred to as accompaniment. Human suffering calls for a response that engages us to be a consoling presence. How do we accompany well? First, let us be attentive to the one living through the vulnerable experience of dying. We must be physically and emotionally present to build a strong sense of sharing in the trials. It's the opposite of staying away or being distant from the person and their experience. Individually and as a community, we must not be indifferent to the challenge of human vulnerability and fragility at the end of life. When someone has difficulty expressing their suffering, let us enter into an attentive, listening attitude. a welcoming and open presence can receive what the person is trying to communicate. We can then create occasions for the person to express themselves and later engage in a dialogue. With a humble, discerning spirit, offer words of consolation to bring comfort and encouragement. We must avoid forcing or controlling these conversations, but instead be steadfast, docile, patient, and prayerful. In front of uncertainty at the end of life, let us find new ways of living in the present. Accompaniment opens this time to remember and share our life stories. It's also about creating new and meaningful memories in the present. Accompaniment encourages the person to connect meaningfully to their lives, past, present, and future. The accompaniment of palliative care can be seen as a space for creative work on time. As individuals and as a community, let us discover ways to share our time in solidarity by recognizing our shared vulnerability. We don't need to be experts to have the ability to accompany, because we accompany through our very own fragility and openness to the other. Christ carries our burdens and encourages us to be beacons of light for our families, our friends, our colleagues, our fellow parishioners. Let us walk with one another in the hope of everlasting life in the world to come.